Hello and welcome to St. Joseph Catholic Church in Edina, Missouri. This audio recording is being created to assist you in a self-guided historic tour of the building. It is being recorded in 2024 to commemorate the 150th anniversary of the church building's dedication. We'll begin the history of this building nearly 50 years before it was built, back in the pioneer settlement days of Edina. Edina became a city in 1839, but by as early as 1837, Roman Catholic citizens had started to settle in Knox County and in Edina. This building is the third church building St. Joseph Parish has had, but before even the first church building was built, in the early days, Mass would be celebrated by visiting priests when they would come through the area in family homes and living rooms, and neighbors would gather and the Catholic citizens would come into the homes for Masses from visiting priests. But then in 1844, a citizen pioneer named Peter Early donated the land and most of the materials to build the first church, which is often called the log church because it was an early small log church, and it was very quickly outgrown. In 1857, finally, the parish was able to build a new, larger brick church that stood roughly where the former convent, now retreat center, stands today. Each new church had been built significantly larger than what was needed. Yet after each church was completed, there was a new surge of Catholic immigrants moving to Edina, and the church would be filled. But it really wasn't until after the Civil War that a few big things started to change. Now we begin the story of how this building came to be. In 1865, the first day of school was September 1st at St. Joseph School. The first day it was open, so we now had a school in our church parish community. Then a new pastor arrived in 1868, Father John Fitzgerald. When he arrived in Edina, in Knox County, he fell in love with the place, and he realized with all the immigrants coming into America, all of the Catholic immigrants, that so many of them would love to know about this beautiful place with a welcoming community and a wonderful school and a vibrant parish. And if they knew about it, they would love to come settle here. So with the help of a newspaper editor, William Clancy, he and William wrote letters to Catholic newspapers all around Boston, Cincinnati, all around the East Coast. And then, not exhausted yet, he had those letters translated into German and began sending them to German Catholic publications and newspapers along the East Coast, advertising all the way up into Canada for Catholics looking for a vibrant Catholic community to come settle in. The letter campaign was a huge success, and by 1872, Father Fitzgerald knew they were going to need a larger church. He was an Irish immigrant and actually hosted immigrant families when they would arrive in Edina. If they didn't have a place to stay, the Irish immigrant families would be allowed to stay at the rectory until they got on their feet and found a place or found a job. And the German immigrant families within the parish would host German immigrant families newly arriving in their own homes and help teach them English and help them get on their feet and established in this new area. Though the name of our parish is St. Joseph Parish, you can see a testament to this element of our history when you enter into the church and stand in the vestibule area. Along the south side, right inside the south entrance doors, you'll see a statue of St. Patrick, who is the patron saint of Ireland. And along the north wall, right inside the north entrance doors, you'll see a statue of St. Boniface, who is the patron saint of Germany. So in 1872, it was obvious that a much bigger church was already needed, and they broke ground for this new third parish church. However, at first, they had a much smaller building planned, and Father Fitzgerald was working with 20-year-old Peter McCauley, who at the time was employed as the janitor of the church, and he was paying him to help him haul stones for the stone foundation. And Peter pointed out to Father that at this rate of growth, by the time this church was completed, it might not be big enough again. Father Fitzgerald realized that Peter was probably correct, and he was struck with inspiration. He halted the current work on the church, jumped on a horse, and rode all the way down to St. Louis. At the time, Edina was part of the Diocese of St. Louis, as the Diocese of Jefferson City had not been formed yet. In St. Louis, Father Fitzgerald met with the bishop and asked for his blessing to build a much larger cathedral-style church here in Edina. The only problems were that the parish here did not have the craftsmen to build the church, did not yet have the number of parishioners to fill the church, and did not have the funds or materials to complete the project. Yet whether it was Father Fitzgerald's enthusiasm or inspiration from the Holy Spirit, or probably a little of both or a lot of both, Father rode away with the bishop's blessing, hurried back to Edina, and he and the parishioners began searching for plans and praying for the craftsmen and the materials and the needed funds, and proceeded with complete faith. Their faith was rewarded. Later in 1872, the arrival of Louis Wisher and Catherine Wisher and their family changed the course of the project. Mr. Wisher was already a well-known architect and woodcarver. He had just completed a beautiful church in Moberly, Missouri, and everyone agreed that Mr. Wisher, along with his son William and his son-in-law Michael Stablin, would be the perfect crew to lead the building of this new church. If you stand in the main aisle of the church and look above and all around, you can imagine how daunting this project might have been, even for a master craftsman like Mr. Wisher. And you can imagine sitting at the table, Father and Mr. Wisher, as they drew up the plans for this incredible 137-foot by 67-foot building. It was decided early on to use native materials as much as possible in building the church. The rock for the foundation came from Rock Creek in Knox County. The brick was fired by the Hade brothers north of town from clay that came from the surrounding hills. The trees from local timber were used in the framing and the interior work. Louis Wisher crafted the original altar, the pulpit from which the readings are read, the railings, and the entry doors from local walnut. And to this day, the entry doors that you probably noticed upon entering the church are original, and the pulpit that we have today is the original pulpit that has been restored. Members of the community, both Catholic and non-Catholic, donated countless hours of labor and time to the building of this church, and that doesn't only include the work on the building itself in place. It also included time searching through local timbers for the trees that would meet the exact specifications that the builders required. This included a 3-month search for the 7 giant pine trees that were needed to support the weight of the roof and the raised dome section of the church's interior. If you look up, the dome raises almost 45 feet in the air, and these giant pine trees were trimmed to a width of 12 inches thick, and then they were placed on 12-inch thick pine girders, which were placed on the stone bases of the basement foundation, again to support the weight of the roof and the raised dome section of the ceiling. Louis Wisher's son-in-law, Michael Stablin, oversaw the brickwork, and under his teaching, the parishioners who donated their time and labor for the task were soon laying bricks for the exterior of the church like seasoned professionals. The pipe organ, which consists of 2,000 pipes, was originally made in Philadelphia for the American Centennial Celebration of 1876. The parish of St. Joseph in Edina purchased it in 1885 and had it transported. It arrived to town in Edina on 3 train cars, and at the time it was said to be the largest organ west of the Mississippi. The church was completed in 1875, except for the steeple. The sources vary on when steeple construction began, but consensus seems to be that they began construction in 1894 on the steeple, beginning with another county-wide search for the giant oak trees that would be needed to construct the spire. The planned steeple would be an octagonal design and would reach nearly 200 feet when completed. When the logs were found, they were then moved to the church grounds to dry. And at that point, they constructed the huge tower on the ground to ensure correct fit of each piece. And then they would take it apart and reassemble it at the top of the tower. And that's how they built the steeple all the way to the top, except for the cross that is on the top. That was added later. There had been a small single bell in the original bell tower, and when the steeple was completed, this single bell was placed in the steeple to ring out the Angelus 3 times a day. But Father Fitzgerald envisioned large bells that could be heard all around town and the surrounding area. And he asked for donations from the parishioners, and his faith was rewarded. 3 bells were donated. All were cast by Henry Stucksteed, and the large bell was donated by Mr. and Mrs. Joseph Clote, and then 2 smaller but still very large bells were donated by John Reese and Mrs. Peter Kurth, and the bells were finished and installed in the year 1900. In 1904, a young woman in the parish, Anna Wisher, who was actually Louis and Catherine's daughter, hand-hammered gold leaf and applied it to a large ball and cross, which were then placed on the top of the steeple, where they remain today. And an interesting story about Anna: in 1872, at the age of 2 years old, she contracted spinal meningitis, which caused her to lose her hearing and her ability to speak. The final finishing touch to the steeple came in the year 1920 or 21, when John Irvin donated the money to install a giant clock in the church tower. The clock has 4 6-foot faces, one on each of the 4 sides of the tower. Some other changes came to the interior in 1920 as well. Unfortunately, the original wooden altar that Louis Wisher had so lovingly carved was falling into disrepair, as well as the original wooden floor in the sanctuary area. So those were removed. The original wooden communion rail, also carved by Wisher, was given to the parish at Milan to beautify their church, and Italian marble was installed in a new sanctuary floor, steps, and communion rail. And at the same time, they also installed 17 new additional stained glass windows. Since 1920, the church has undergone several more renovations, but the basic structure remains unchanged to this day. However, it is worth giving a minute to honor the work that has been done in this 21st century. The church had not had any major updates since 1965, and in 2007, a committee of volunteers was formed to plan not only for much-needed updates, but also for a complete redecorating of the entire church interior, with plans to restore much of the classic beauty of the past. It was decided to use local talent to achieve this goal, as has been done in the original construction in the 1870s, and the committee was able to achieve this goal with great success. The work spanned over 3 years, and other than the marble flooring in the sanctuary area, the entire interior of the church received new flooring and was repainted. The paint for the tin ceiling tiles was mixed to match colors that it had previously been painted in the 1940s. The marble altar that had been placed in 1965 was removed and replaced with one designed and built from scratch from quarter sawn oak, reminiscent of the first altar that was used in the newly built church. The oak pews and the oak arched doors on either side of the sanctuary were restored, beautifully exposing the warm wood tones. The wooden railing surrounding the choir loft was also refinished, and the bases of the fluted columns in the body of the church were replaced in oak, similar to their original design. An additional project was reopening the main entrance area to reveal the beautiful stained glass window that depicts the agony in the garden. And also the area above the entrance doors is now visible, and the stained glass panels that extend upward all the way into the bell tower can be seen from inside the main entrance now. To finish out the bell tower area, materials from the old St. Joseph School were used, such as tin for the ceiling, and wood panels from the stage in the old school were used to finish the wall behind the pipe organ. However, what is probably most incredible about these extensive renovation and restoration efforts is that 3 short years later, they would do it all again. And miraculously, they were able to do it all again, not just because of the work it took, but that the building was still there for the work to be done in. In August of 2013, we received word that our beloved church was on fire. The church was saved thanks to the efforts of the many firefighters who responded from multiple fire departments, who sent their men and their equipment from departments up to 30 miles away. It is thanks to them that we still have this church within which we worship. And so this video, this tour, this history lesson today is dedicated in thanks to them and the restoration committee that redid all of the work that they had already previously done all over again after the fire to restore the church to its beauty. This video is dedicated to all of them, as well as to the visionary men and women in 1872 that began the journey of building this extraordinary monument, and to all of the men and women who have so lovingly cared for it over the years.